All right, let's bring in our Political Insiders panel to respond to this. I've got former Chief of Staff to Bill Shorten and current Director of GXO Strategies, Cameron Milner, also the former Press Secretary to Scott Morrison, and now Director at Headline Advisory, Andrew Carswell. Cameron, Andrew, welcome to you both. Cameron, first to you. What's your response to this story, to the revelations that the security chiefs are no longer permanent members of the National Security Committee of Cabinet? They have to be invited in on a case-by-case basis. Also, to the role of Glyn Davis and to the Albanese government's approach to China.
Well, what an extraordinary exclusive. And thank goodness you've brought up this news for us and our viewers, because this is an incredible development in terms of our national security. In the week that Wang Yi is coming to meet Paul Keating in Sydney and a couple of other Australian officials, you've got Glyn Davis, who is obviously a Beijing buddy, who's worked with China. He's been an apologist for China on campus in his time as professor, still staying on the National Security Committee, overseeing reviews of key strategic agencies like ASPI. So Glyn Davis, who's a mate of China, who's been there on multiple times, he stays on the committee, but our actual professional heads of intelligence, who you would think would have to be in every single meeting, they're there by invitation from Glyn. It's appalling. Glyn has lots of questions to answer. I'm glad your program started those questions, but Glyn has to come out from the shadows and explain just how close he is to Beijing, because I think he's incredibly close.
Andrew Carswell, and just on that point, I did put questions to Glyn Davis today, as I mentioned, about his past ties with China in his role as university professor. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but it is different from the national security approach that we've seen in more recent years under the coalition government. Andrew Carswell, what do you think about all of this?
Well, it says to me, Sharri, that even in the most important room, arguably in the country, certainly in Parliament House, that personality, politics and ideology sit above issues of national security when it comes to the hierarchy. I mean, this is galling, and this says that the political geniuses in National Security Committee of Cabinet think they know more about issues of intelligence and national security than chiefs that have been in the game for decades. It says a lot about the political personnel in that room more so than the intelligence personnel. But it also says it's either two things here. It's either they stopped listening to the intelligence chiefs a long time ago and now they're just getting rid of them, save them from the embarrassment of having to appear and not say anything, or that this is just a pushback against the public rhetoric that we're hearing more and more from our intelligence chiefs because they feel like they're not being listened to. They've been railing against Chinese aggression for a very long time, and they've suddenly run headlong into a government that does not want to hear one bit of it. I mean, how galling is the fact that the very guy that could save the nation from an imminent attack is booted out? The guy that could save the economy from being inundated with cyber aggression is booted out. We don't want to hear from him anymore. It says a lot about the fact that Anthony Albanese sees this role as he's the genius here. Penny Wong and him are the geniuses here. They know more about this. But when you take intelligence out of the room, all you're left with is ideology.
I think that Mike Burgess's most recent address to the nation, where he outlined that our top threat, unquestionably, he said, was foreign interference, and then he later confirmed in interviews that that was China. He also said the top terror threat was Islamic extremism. And both of these areas you never hear the government speak about. You don't hear Albanese speaking about Islamic extremism, Penny Wong either. You don't hear them speaking about Chinese foreign interference. They've prioritise getting the relationship back on track rather than calling out Chinese aggression, despite the fact that they have the motto that you need to agree where you can and disagree where you must. There isn't any disagreeing going on despite that being their motto. And then you had this today in the Senate. Trade Minister Don Farrell, he was standing in for Penny Wong, and he was asked a question about why the government resumed funding to UNRWA despite its links to terrorism. Listen to what he had to say.
Minister, why is the Albanese Labor government acting in opposition to the United States, our most trusted international partner, who await the outcomes of the investigation into UNRWA and in the interim is pursuing alternate means of delivering more humanitarian assistance?
Well, I take issue with your original or your first statement there. I'm not sure that the United States is our most trusted ally. I would have said New Zealand.
Cameron Milner, United States, not our most trusted ally. I mean, the timing of these comments, the same week as Wang Yi arrives in Australia, can't be a coincidence.
And Don was obviously channeling his inner Penny Wong thoughts in that remark. But I find it appalling. I live in Brisbane. We were the Brisbane line during the Second World War. General MacArthur based himself in Brisbane. The 7th Fleet was created in Brisbane, the US 7th Fleet. If not for the US, we would not have been able to defend against Japan and the hyper-aggression at that time from Japan. So the World War II was won because of American assistance and Australian grit and hard work. It's appalling. It's appalling that we'd forget that history so quickly and dismiss the importance of AUKUS to defending our nation yet again in terms of Chinese aggression in the South China Sea and elsewhere.
I mean, Andrew, we rely, as Cameron just indicated, we rely on the United States to protect us. You know, God forbid we should ever need protection in our region. New Zealand's not going to come to our aid. New Zealand's not going to have the military equipment to defend us. And by the way, New Zealand doesn't even have the same approach to us on China or national security.
Yeah, look, it's just embarrassing. I mean, this is not just a Labor backbencher. This is the Trade Minister. And these are statements that you would expect to come from a Green senator or a crossbencher that is on the fringe. It is not something that should be uttered by a Trade Minister. And look, it's Don Farrell. I mean, it's like Mum and Dad were away and, you know, just let the crazy uncle up to the microphone to give his spray. That's what we've come to expect here. You know, you see the smirk on his face. He was, you know, sidestepping a very important question asked about funding to Gaza, and he thought he could just tiptoe around it, but instead he just fell over his own feet. It's embarrassing.